Hi everyone, this is Arkady Frekhtman. I'm a New York City personal injury trial attorney, and today I'm coming to you from Trial Lawyers University in Huntington Beach, California. It's a 3-day intensive CLE. And today I actually wanted to talk to you about something that I brought with me. So I brought this article with me, and it's an article by Gerry Spence, a very famous trial attorney who did a lot of different types of cases: criminal defense, personal injury, civil justice, civil rights. And it's called Creating the First Impression Voir dire. And this is about selecting a jury. Now, a lot of people on my channel ask me, how much am I going to get? And they give me their injury, right? Like, for example, I have an L5-S1 herniated disc, I had an injection, or I even had a surgery. How much am I going to get? And so a lot of that, right, the answer to that question really depends on your lawyer, the preparation, whether or not the lawyer tells the true, authentic human story, and the way that your lawyer picks a jury. Because if the insurance company chooses not to be fair, for example, let's say there's a lot of money on the insurance policy. Let's say there's 10 million or 5 million, but there's 20 million excess or umbrella. So there's a lot of money, like 25 million or more. So potentially, if you come into court and the insurance company is being cheap, and you have a life-changing forever injury, like a spine surgery, traumatic brain injury, and your lawyer and yourself, you agreed, you think the case is worth a certain amount, like you're trying to obtain, let's say, $3 million. That way, you will get about $2 million for yourself as a client after attorney's fees in your pocket, or more, right? It could be 5 million, it could be 10 million. But let's say you and your lawyer have come into the courtroom because the insurance company has just been super cheap. The insurance company has offered you only $5,000 or $50,000. It doesn't matter, but nowhere near what you're looking for, nowhere near what you think civil justice in this case is. So you're in the courtroom, and now you have a panel of jurors. You have, like, say, 20 jurors, and your lawyer has to speak to this panel, prospective jurors. These are just people who got a summons in the mail and have been told, hey, you have to come for jury duty. If you don't come, a warrant may be issued for your arrest. So a lot of these people don't want to be there, but they're a captive audience. They have to because it's the law, right? You don't have to vote. I mean, you don't have to, there's a lot of things you don't have to do as a citizen, but jury duty is one of the things that you do have to do. Like, for example, if you turn 18 and there's a war, there's a draft, you may have to serve in the military, and in the same way you have to show up for jury duty. So this lawyer, Gerry Spence, he wrote an entire article about it, and actually it's a transcript from a CLE that he gave back in, a long time ago. I don't know exactly the date, but he talks to a group of lawyers. And so I thought it was really interesting. There's a lot of gold nuggets you could take from this as an attorney. And if you use these nuggets in your practice when you're picking a jury, you could probably obtain much more money. So for example, the case that some lawyer may settle for, let's say $500,000, that's a good number. But if you use some of these tidbits, these nuggets, maybe you could turn that into $5 million. So let's get into it. What are these nuggets? What is this all about? So he starts off by being honest, being like brutally honest and talking to the jury authentically. And he tells them, look, I don't feel good. It is intimidating for me to stand up here because I assume that you're looking down at me and you have expectations, right? And I'm thinking to myself, as a lawyer picking a jury and about to begin this trial, I'm thinking to myself, can I fulfill your expectations? Because you as jurors, of course, are expecting me to prove my case. You're expecting me to be this amazing Clarence Darrow or, perfect lawyer. And can I meet those expectations? It's something that every one of you know about, because every time you walk into a jury room, you say to yourself, and he's talking to the lawyers, you say to yourself, can I fulfill my client's expectations? Can I make this thing work? Do I have what it takes to get into this pit, into this room, into this place where people die or people bleed, and make it all work? And that's true. You're always afraid. Like, I'm afraid when I go into trial. A lot of lawyers are afraid because it's a very scary thing, right? If you win, someone goes free. If you lose, someone gets 20 years. If you win, the client wins $10 million. If you lose, the client gets zero. The client still has the life-changing forever injury in both instances, right? And it's up to you to make it happen. So it's a lot of pressure. So he says, look, down in my belly, I feel the same old things that I have felt from the very beginning, as long as I can remember. From the time I was a kid getting up in the class in 4th grade and having to give a speech in front of the class, right? So this is really good because he says, look, when I did that, I wet my pants. So what is he doing? He's being honest. He's giving his fears. He's being vulnerable. And vulnerability is power if you embrace it. And he says, nothing changes. We don't change. Only our appearances change. Our outsides change, but nothing really changes from the 4th grade up until when he's like 50 years old and a famous trial lawyer. So I thought that was a very important point. And it's a long article. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I wanted to just share a few tidbits. And the next thing that I really thought was interesting is he talks to the jurors and he says, look, be who you are, or be who you were. He talks, I'm sorry, not to the jurors, but he talks to the lawyers, right? He's talking to these lawyers. And he says, look, you have to shed your skin. You have to shed this legal education. Be who you were before you became lawyers. If you were a painter, a waiter, whoever you were. And also, what is your passion? What do you really care about? For example, if you weren't whatever your profession is, if you weren't a driver, an Uber driver, if you weren't a fishmonger selling branzino and selling fish or selling shrimp, what profession would you do? Who would you be? Like, if you ask me, hey, maybe I'd be a writer because I like writing, I like creativity. I'd love to write a novel, right? If you ask someone else, maybe they want to be a baseball player or whatever it is. So it really gets down into the core. And he's asking them, look, when you listen to this case, have a little compassion, because it's not easy to be put down in front of all these people. And what is the goal of the jury selection? It's for us to learn something together as a group. And so if I'm being sincere, then I am frightened. And he says, let's try to do this together. And please stop to think about how it is not only to be yourself, but to be this man who stands here afraid and who can actually feel it. And I guess what he's saying here is, he's saying, I'll come in and out of this voir dire to comment upon it. But at the very beginning, I want you to stop and think about how it is not only to be yourself, but also to be this man who stands here afraid and who can actually feel it. And that's almost like a psychodrama technique, because in psychodrama, what you do is you reverse roles. So you can reverse roles, like he's asking the jurors maybe to think about what it is to be him standing up there as a lawyer, but you could also reverse roles with your client, right? What is it like to be an injury victim? And then he says, but what is it like to also be a juror? What is that like, right? Because you're getting the summons, you didn't ask for it. And let's say, for example, that you're from Oklahoma and all you know is working on a farm, and you're an automobile mechanic and you work on a farm. And all of a sudden you get the summons and you're being told to go to this courtroom. And there's a judge dressed in black for death, and nothing grows in this place, right? There's nothing growing in a courtroom. So it's all foreign to you. It's all different. There aren't any plants or goldfish or children playing or any noises. There aren't any mechanical sounds. These are not things that you're used to. And your toolkit is your home, it's your hand, you put on your Sunday best, and you go to this place. And now the judge is telling you, you have to do something very important with people that you don't know, and you're being asked to understand procedures and laws that you know nothing about. So aren't you afraid? Wouldn't you be afraid as this farmer or this mechanic from Oklahoma? Of course you would. You would get all uptight, you would get scared. And so he says, of course, it's natural. And he says, I don't know you and you don't know me, but I'm worried about whether or not I'm going to be able to do the kind of job that I should do here this morning. And now he's talking about himself as a lawyer. And I suspect that maybe you have been involved in it and have feelings like this. So I thought that was really interesting. And then also he says, how many of you think that you could know something about the way that I'm feeling this morning? And then he would let the jurors talk to him and tell him their feelings. And then he just listens to the jurors and says, thank you, who else, what else? And so it's very open-ended. And he asks, do you know each other on the jury? Have you met each other? Well, why don't you look at each other? Why don't you meet each other? Because if you get selected, you're going to have to work together as a group, right? It's a group decision at the end. So why don't you meet each other? So that's really good to form the group. And then he says, look, when he asks questions, he says, would you leave room for a possibility that you may have to, that people who try something new are taking risks of the kind that they ought to take? And that as a lawyer, you can't just do the same old, but you might have to work out on the edge. And when you work out on the edge where they ought to work, that's where, you're not going over the edge. You can't do something unethical or something illegal, obviously, but you have to be out on the edge. And he says, when you say that I can't do that in my jurisdiction as a lawyer, like for example, if you say, I can't ask that question in my jurisdiction because the judge will scream at me or the defendant will object, right? If you're scared, then you've already been beaten. It's over before it begins. So you have to work on the edge. You have to push the envelope. And I love that. I love that about Gerry Spence. And then he says, look, they had this sense in their mind that if they got off the jury, that it means that they're unqualified as human beings. And what he's talking about here is that he says it's going to be hard to get people off for cause once they get into the box and once you're speaking with them, because they might feel that if you're trying to get them off, like in the beginning, people might say, oh, I have plane tickets, or I have a doctor's appointment, or I'm the only caretaker for my child, and they want to get off. But once they're already in the box, once they start being questioned by the lawyers, now everything changes. It's like 180 degrees. Now they have their sense in their mind that if they get off, that means that they're unqualified as human beings, or that they're bad citizens, or that something else is wrong. So we have to unhook them of that idea to begin with. So the way he unhooks them of that idea is he asks them, he says, look, you don't have to sit on every case. You're folks, and I'd just like to take a minute, if I could, and tell you that as jurors, you have some rights. And that's true. Jurors have rights. And it's important for a lawyer to empower the jury. And he says, look, the fact that you have rights, that may come as a surprise to you, but you are citizens too, and you have rights. And you don't have to sit on every case. There might be a case you don't like, because we all come in here with who we are and who we're trying to become. And if it's a case that you don't like, for example, it's a case about, let's say, a trip and fall on a crack in the sidewalk. And maybe someone's aunt fell on a crack and you really loved your aunt or your grandmother. She was like, granny to you. You loved her. And she fell on a crack. And she had a terrible injury and then she died because of it. That might be too emotional. And if you have to sit on a jury about a crack that was similar, you just can't handle it. And you should be excused, right? So you don't have to sit on every case, and you don't have to agree to every proposition of law that the judge gives to you. Maybe you don't like that proposition of law. For example, he says you can't be sworn to follow the judge's instructions in black and then have them tell you to go and bomb City Hall, for example, right? Because you think that's wrong, right? But you don't know what the judge is going to tell you. I mean, in personal injury, it's usually something like reasonable care, but it does get specific sometimes about certain types of cases. And if you disagree with something or you feel like something doesn't sit right with you, so you don't have to agree to every proposition of law the judge gives you. And I guess what he's trying to say here is that we're all individuals, and each of us has their own ideas about what is right and what is wrong, and that we are preachers of our own experience. And that's a really good point, because we all do come into a case with who we are, our history, our thoughts, our feelings, and who we are trying to become, our futures. And so he says, yeah, we are preachers of our own experience, but we're also preachers of what has happened to us. And so it follow that we cannot all see things the same way, that we might not all agree with the law that is involved in this case, right? And if you don't agree with the law, but the judge is telling you you have to follow the law, maybe you can't, and you don't have to, and then you're out of the case, right? And so this is a technique you could use to get rid of the bad jurors. So he's saying the voir dire is as much for your benefit, the juror's benefit, as it is for anybody else. And then he says, well, how many of you would be willing to stand up for your rights? See what he's doing? He's empowering the jury. He's empowering there, and it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, there's more to this article, so maybe I'll do another video. I don't want this one to go too long. I have to go. We're gonna start classes soon at this CLE. But please like and subscribe to our channel. Let us know what questions you have, and thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.